Welcome T11 student to the course on human computer interaction. So today's video lecture is based on user centered design, that is UCD. The next reference contents are taken from the following references. So you can please take a look at it. So far so good what you have learned in SCPM, and so far in general we can say that the example of traditional approach for software development lifecycle is you gather the requirements, you analyze, you design, you implement, you test, and you do the operation and maintenance. It's part of it. So what have you seen so far is this is the kind of traditional model, and we call it as waterfall model. It has got a lot of lacunas, lot of problems. So it is really different from the HCI and its design part. So rather than traditional design models adopted within software engineering, which are characterized by their linearity, HCI has adopted a design model which aspires to incorporate the following premises. So the following premises are really considered very important. We call it as user-centered design, the multidisciplinary field that are being considered, and highly iterative model. So you can see that only in this diagram on the top it is saying system centered design. So what can be built easily on this platform is what is system designed concerns, we can say. What can I create from the available tools, and what do I as a programmer find interesting to work on. So this is what we call system centered design. So the other part of the design is called as user-centered design, and what is considered in user-centered design. So design is based upon users' abilities and real needs. So it's not like system-centered design. So it is based on what can be built, rather what should be built, right? So abilities of and real needs, context and the work and the task. So the golden rule of interface design is know the user. You must know the user, you must know their needs, you must know their requirements. So what is user-centered design is an approach to iterative system development that focuses specifically on making the products web interfaces usable, right? So the quality of interaction between the person who uses the product to achieve the actual work and the product itself is primary goal of UCD, right? So user-centered system empower users and motivate them to learn and explore new system solutions. Naturally, if you want to design something for somebody, you must incorporate their help, you must involve them right from the stage one. So you must seek their approval, you must identify, they must get some positive motivations. You as a designer, you should get positive feedback about what things you are designing, because they are the one who are actually going to use it. So without their involvement, it has got no importance, no value, no usage. So it is really very important as a designer, you must consider the users at center. So the UCD methodology is characterized by the involvement of users throughout the design process. The use of iterative design cycle is really important, right? So we say that involvement of user throughout the design process. At every stage you must involve user. Now again, sincerely, there are advantages also and disadvantages. We can assume plenty of advantages of people getting involved into certain process, which is actually may not be their lookout. They might be the end people that they are going to use the product. But if it is designed with their approvals, if it is designed by considering them, you must consider them. Or even if you don't get the actual user, you can mock the users, you can be in their shoes. The designer itself can become act or pretend like a user and have some requirements like that. So plenty of ways. So there are naturally advantages and disadvantages. If people are not motivated enough, if they hate to use some new system, they may find out lacunas and difficult things into your product. So these are the difficult issues that need to be handled. So the use of an iterative design cycle. So there is the use of an iterative design cycle is really important. You should always keep some scope for improvement. So if you happen to do something wrong, you should be able to go back, make it correct and come back, right? So the involvement of user throughout the design process, an example of web design. This is the website. I want you to visit it and identify. So what it says, the most important part is focus on user. So you must be able to focus on user and user testing and many more things. So there are a number of ways in which user participation can be facilitated through the design process. So you can have focus groups which are going to be talking about some specific part. You can have questionnaires, you can talk to users, you can interview them, you can observe them when using. So there are a couple of techniques of observation. You can have think aloud technique, where a user, when you operating some system or an interface, would speak it loudly enough to make it understand. Or there is watching above the shoulder shoulders. So when the user is using some system, you can watch the user from above the shoulders. So you can do testing part of it. So normally we say that there are two separate such kind of tests which are available. People do alpha testing, beta testing. So when you test your interface with your own people during the controlled environment, we call it as alpha testing. And when you test the same interface in the outside real world, you call it as beta testing. So you might come across many such examples when certain website is under beta testing and it is expecting user to use it and launch some problems if at all they are facing. So the use of an iterative design cycle. Iterative design is a process where an interface is progressively developed and improved over a series of iterations, such the result of user testing and feedback. So in its simplest form, iterative design cycle can be said to have three phases: design, test, and redesign. So iteratively it is going to do all these things. So these phases operate in a continual cycle. In theory, that is, in practice iterations are limited by the budgetary considerations, right? So that designs are continually evaluated and improved. So you always need to have a scope of negative or feedback system. So as long as the feedback system is there, so you gotta have the better design of it. So key aspects of user-centered design. So if somebody asks you what is the key aspect, what do you actually mean by the user-centered design? So the early focus on users, their tasks and their environment, the active involvement of user, whatsoever it is, an appropriate allocation of function between user and system, so that is also very important, and iterative design where a prototype is designed, tested and modified. So, and the most important, multidisciplinary design teams. So this is, multidisciplinary design teams are really important because you have to have people from different domains, different backgrounds, and they are going to give their input and trying to make the system in a better way. So iterative design is going to help us for by designing different many types of different prototypes and tested and modified. So only one approach is not enough, so you have to have couple of different approaches, you have to have different prototypes and select the best one out of it. So these are the key aspects of user-centered design. So early focus on users, tasks and environment. If you involve people right from the stage one, it is really going to be beneficial. The characteristics of the intended users, the task the users will perform, the environment in which the users will use the system. So you got to understand this, that you have to focus early on users. So an appropriate allocation of function between user and system. So determining which aspects of a task should be handled by people and which can be handled by software and hardware is critical importance. So task allocation need to be done. The allocation of function should be based on an appreciation of human capabilities and their limitations. You must allocate those tasks which are possible for humans and the where the human brain is really going to be useful. So this allocation benefits from the input of end users, which will also help to ensure that the results are acceptable to people who will be affected. The active involvement of user, the key strength of user interface design is the active involvement. So involving end users can also enhance the acceptance and commitment to the new software, as staff some to feel that the system is being designed in consultation with them rather than being imposed on them. So there was a time in India when the people, the computer world or the computers were getting introduced to the banking system, core banking and all that. So all these bank employees who were using those systems for which the interface was getting designed, initially they had a lot of resistance because of this misconcept that if the computers are going to come, then it is going to be an automation process and people won't be, the staffing would be a problem and people would be removed from their job. So initially they had a negative impact and people were not easy or ready to accept it. So even now also, when we are moving towards from online offline, like face to face teaching to online teaching, so there could be many other people who might feel that my video lectures is a kind of replacement for the actual teaching, but it's not going to be like that. People or the users need to be made understood that the computers, the artificial intelligence, the HCI, for that matter any system that is going to be there, is going to be a helpful tool for doing the activities. It should be taken in that positive manner, right? So involving end users is also enhance the chance or the acceptance and commitment of a software, so people would love to use it. The user's prompt attempt to accomplish real world tasks using the prototype and the feedback from exercise is used to develop the design further. So when you design something, so you must involve user, as we have said. So you design prototypes, ask user to use it. Those prototypes may be a paper based prototypes or simply web designed prototypes which does not have any functionality. But user, if you, the kind of interaction that user do, what kind of problems that user do, so it's naturally, you call it as kacha design. So kacha design gets approved, then you design with pakka design. So that's a basic concept that works with the kind of design. So if you don't consider users uh, approach, then it is really difficult to design certain systems. The multidisciplinary design teams, so user-centered design is a collaborative process which benefits from the active involvement of various parties for the insights and expertise to share. So that's really very important. So design teams may include managers, usability specialists, training and support staff, software engineers, and of course the end users involvement. So more about its user-centered design. Project planning has to allow iteration for incorporating user feedback. Yes, it is really important. More time will be also required for effective communication between design team participants and for reconciling potential conflicts and trade-offs. So this is going to be an iterative process. So this is also very important part. However, project managers will get benefited from the additionally creativity and ideas from an extended development team and skill base. So this is going to be a good takeaway for them. So users will also feel a very strong sense of ownership of the system, that yes, maybe mera bhi isme contribution hai, I was a part of it from day one. So people like to use the system. So, above all, proper consideration of usage issues early on the project will result in better design and sufficient saving at later stages when changes are much more costly. Yes, if any change at the latter stage is going to be costly, and not only in terms of monetary benefit but also in terms of its time, the kind of amount of time that has been spent, the resources that has been utilized. So it's really difficult to make any changes in the latter stage of the design. So it is always beneficial that whatever, so these are documented well enough in the form of SRS or requirement gathering, so that at runtime, at later stage, it's really difficult and costly to change anything right from the scratch. So what are the different HCM models? So we call it the star life cycle, the interface design and usability engineering by Sol Greenberg. So you call it as IDUE. So then Lucid, so logical user interface design, so design framework. Then ICD, IDP, the design implementation and evaluation. Discover design used by John Cato. So these are different HCI design models which are actually used for designing usable products outside. So these are some examples. This is beyond our scope of discussion currently, but yes, you can refer this website. So T11 guys, thank you very much for patiently listening. We are almost done with unit number 1, and in the next video lectures we'll be starting with unit number 2. So all the best, stay connected and happy learning.